another quick tie. Your next fly starts here.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Quick Tie. My name is Tim Hepworth here with Thursday Night Live Fly Tying and Fly Fishing Bow Over Outfitters, and we are here to bring you the Mr. Peanut Hopper tonight. Super simple. This one's going to build your confidence because it's an effective fly that doesn't take a crazy amount of work or skill or time to tie, which is actually what we would call a guide fly most of the time, which is awesome. It's something that's simple and effective, and you can just crank them out. I'm going to be tying out of my Season 7 kit today. It's going to look something like this. If you don't already have one of these, you can head over to our website and still purchase them today. It doesn't matter that we're a long ways through the season, as all you got to do is scan the barcode on the front of each of these, and it's going to take you right to this video and each video that corresponds to the flies in each of those kits. If you're tying out of our individual kits, that's great as well. Materials are going to be exactly the same. Packaging will just look a little different. And if you don't have any of our kits, that's fine as well. Head on over to our website for a full fly recipe, and you'll be able to look through, get the material list that you need, and especially on a simple one like this, and head over to the vise and just tie up with your own stuff if you already have it. All right, well, let's, without further ado, head on over to the vise, take a look at the fly, and we'll get going. Like I said, really simple. There's really 3 materials in total. We got some legs, some foam, and some hair. Some deer hair, elk hair, whatever you got on hand. And definitely some super glue is going to help on this one, as this is, there's nothing really binding this besides thread to the hook. But a little super glue will keep this very secure, as you can see that on the underside there. But yeah, very, very simple fly. So let's just get at it. For thread tonight, I'm going to be using some UTC 140 in yellow, as it pairs nice with this color combo. And as you can tell, we're using a 2-tone colored foam, which you have in your kit. And the fun part is it's a play your own adventure. Do you want it to be yellow on the bottom, or do you want it to be brown on the bottom? Personally speaking, I kind of like the look of this, so I went with the brown on the bottom, and I'll probably do that again. But all you got to do is when we tie it in, you flip it around the other way, and you could have the opposite of that color scheme. All right, well, let's pop this one out of the vise. Let's get our next hook in, and we will get started. All right, make sure this is good and level as well as tight in your vise. You don't want this one moving around on you, as we are going to be pulling some fairly hefty tension on our wraps as it's wrapping in that foam on the hook shank. Again, like I said, some UTC 140 in yellow. I'm going to start by putting my thread just up behind the eye, working it rearward. Let's take the time here to make a good coverage over the whole hook shank, as it is going to be visible on the bottom, and we'd like it to be covered with whatever accent colored thread that we're using. So I'm going to take this all the way back to the bend, back forward, and then we'll take it back to the back one more time after that. We're just making sure that we got good coverage. Can't see any of that shiny hook coming through anymore. Right up to behind the eye, and then we'll go back down. I think we got pretty good coverage that time. We'll just open spiral back. All right, now where we start this fly is going to be right at the barb, and we are going to be tying in our foam to start. But before we tie it in, we're going to make a little cut on it. So we are going to cut an angle into the back of this, kind of creating like the butt or the back end of the fly. We want to cut at an angle. I start shallow, and I'm not going to make this into a point. It's kind of like a dull arrow is what we're looking at here. Try to get your angles to match up if you can. And that's as much of a cut as you're going to have to do. Now, like I said, this is where you're going to make a decision which color you want down, which color you want up. As I said before, I think I'm going to go ahead with brown on bottom again. I like the color accent this way. But all you'd have to do is this, and you'd have a yellow hopper on the bottom. That's what's kind of nice about the 2-tone foam. Now, for how far this is going to stick out the back, we want it to extend so that where our cut finished on the edges, that matches up with the bend of the hook. Okay, so we're going to set that back so you can see that cut edge right here is right at the bend of the hook. So it's not going to hang off super far at all. We want to center that the best that we can right up on top of the hook shank. And I'm going to switch hands here. And now we're going to be making 4 segments in total, plus the head. So this will be our first segment. I'm going to come and take a loose wrap, a second wrap that's a little bit tighter, and then a third wrap, pinching the foam on top of the hook shank and pull down tight. Now you're going to see if I let go of that, it wants to rotate. That's going to get better as we make more segments. You can add a couple more thread wraps, that'll help as well. There's nothing wrong with adding more thread wraps to secure it, but you do need to be careful that you don't pull too tight, as it will cut the foam, especially if you're using a thinner thread. Now I'm going to lift up here, and I'm going to take a few thread wraps forward. Our next one's going to be probably just about in front of the point. I also, a little geeky about it, but I like my segments to get slightly larger as I go towards the head. Doesn't always work out perfect. It's hard to eyeball. But this will be our first standalone segment. We're gonna do exactly the same thing. So one wrap, start to tighten a little. Second wrap's tighter. Third wrap is all the pressure, and I'm gonna pinch. Okay. Now if we look at that from the bottom, you can see how that foam's kind of squeezing around the underside, looking pretty good. You can always work to center it so that it's right up on top of the hook shank. Now let's go ahead and get into our third segment. Again, try to keep about the even spacing. We are gonna wanna stop somewhere back here behind the eye, so we have to get 2 segments more in here. So just kind of keep that in mind. This will be our next one. Again, I'm gonna do the same thing. First wrap, loose. Second one, a little tighter. Third one, full tension. Maybe add another one just because. And then my last one, like I said, leaving some space behind the eye. It's gonna be my number 4. And I'm trying to keep my wraps as straight across on top as possible, so those segments look nice and smooth. There we go. Now, what I do know, because I've tied this pattern a few times already, this is way too much foam. So if you're working with a really long piece like this, we are gonna be folding this back over top to create the head and pushing that forward to about there. So I'm just gonna make a rough trim right now because I know I don't need all of this foam, just to get a little bit out of the way. Now from here, we've got a couple more materials to get in at the spot. This is the only tie-in spot where we're gonna put extra materials, and those materials are gonna be deer hair first, or elk hair, whichever you have on hand. And the next one is just gonna be our legs, our rubber legs. So from this position, I'm gonna go ahead and grab my deer hair. I'm gonna try to grab about a pencil width and thickness. Again, that's a really hard thing everybody says that, but what does that actually mean? Well, that just means you're eyeballing something that's roughly the thickness of a pencil when you're not compressing it super tight. Okay, so this is gonna be very close to what I want for this wing. I'm gonna trim that out right down near the base so we get the full length of it. And we're gonna be stacking this in our hair stacker. So I got a hold of this. I do need to go tips first into there, but before I do that, I'm gonna come up here and grab by the tips that I have, and I wanna clean that out a little bit. Or if you've got a little comb of some kind, come in here and comb out any of that under fur, because that stuff does not add anything to the fly, and it causes the hair to not want to stack properly. Then I'm gonna go ahead to my hair stacker here, or deer stacker as Dana likes to call it. Let's get our tips pointed down and into it. And I always start by kind of just encouraging any of those stray hairs to go in there. And then I'm gonna get it a few wraps on the table. Then when I pull this off, I'll pull the base off first, and you can see my tips nice and aligned right there. Get that into focus so you can see them. I come in here and pull them out. And this is where you kind of got to juggle them between your fingers, making sure that they're not losing those tips. Excuse me. Now I'm going to measure this so that it's going to stick out roughly to the back of the foam from this tie-in spot. Okay, so that's a rough measurement. Doesn't have to be perfect, but close. I'm gonna switch my hands back over, keeping that same spot that I just measured, and expose the butt ends. Now I'm gonna cut these first. I'm not gonna cut them after. This is the Kelly Gallup method of tying in deer hair, which I absolutely love. I'm gonna come in here, leaving myself a little bit of space for my fingers, so I cut a little bit ahead of my measurement. In 2 pulls of thread, we should be able to get this secure. I'm gonna go with my first one, up and over the deer hair, start to tighten down. You'll see it start to flare. Second one on top of it, pull tight. And just like that, our deer hair is tied in. Now, for some extra security, it doesn't hurt to come in here and drive a few thread wraps through the butt ends, but we will not need to trim any of that hair out if you did that properly, as it's all gonna be concealed here. Now, this is standing up quite high right now, but with building the head here, it's gonna fold right back over and it's not gonna be in the way like that at all. So that brings us to the next point, which is gonna be building the head. Now I'm gonna grab this foam, lay it back, and you see if I pull back, I got this space here by the eye. So I need to rotate that foam forward. So it's making a little bubble or a little top hat on this guy, just like Mr. Peanut. We're gonna bring that forward till the front of that bubble is roughly even with the eye. And then right in this position, I'm gonna come up and over, straight as I can, and we're gonna be working on some, again, increasing tension to compress that foam. Don't worry what your deer hair looks like right now. It's probably getting flattened out the sides, kind of like that. Okay, but we're gonna trim that foam back in a second. I wanna make sure that those are perfectly stacked on top of each other. Gonna put a few more increasing tension type wraps, and that should be good. That's our head. Worked out pretty good here. Now I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna trim off this foam, and I want it to be a little shorter than the distance from my tie-in to the front of the head. Okay, so I'm just gonna lift this up, slide my scissors in. I'm gauging it so I think it's a little bit less than that head. And I'm trim it off as straight as possible. Just like that. Now I'm gonna go ahead and grab the deer hair that's all splayed out right now. I'm just gonna gather it and pull it right back under that foam. You might have a few strays that wanna go out their own way, but most of it's gonna sit right back perfectly on top of the fly. Just like so. Now we're on to the last piece of the puzzle here, guys, and that's gonna be our rubber legs. So you've got these nice long strips of rubber legs in your kit. I want you to separate 2 off at a time, so you have 2 together like this that are still attached. We're gonna make our legs by first throwing a knot about 1/3 of the way up on one side. This is just a simple overhand knot. Gonna put it in here like so. So it's just a simple overhand knot and pull it tight. Okay, it's gonna be the knuckle. So I did that to 1. Now I need to separate 2 more off like this. Grab another set and put the same knot in those ones. Same thing, pull that knot nice and tight. Okay, now let's get to tying these in. We're gonna utilize this entire piece of rubber leg, or virtually all of it, with the legs. This is gonna form our rear leg and our front leg. Now I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna place my finger up against my tie-in point, and I want that knuckle to be roughly at the end of the bend of the hook. Okay, so I'm looking at it. Might be a little long there, but somewhere in there, because once I tie this in, it's gonna pull this leg back forward. I'm just gonna go with it right there, kind of like that. I'm gonna tie this in so it's right in between those 2 layers of foam at the head. And I've only done a couple of wraps here so I can come in here and pull it around a bit so I make sure it's sitting where I want it to. So you're gonna be left with something looking like this right now. Okay. Now I'm gonna take just one more wrap to secure that. I want that rear leg pointed back and down. Now I'm gonna repeat the process on the near side of the fly, trying to match up the knuckles so that they're roughly the same distance back. That looks pretty close. Tie this one in on this side, same thing, couple of wraps. If I need to adjust it, I can go ahead and adjust it. Making sure everything's sitting pretty. Now what I'm gonna do from here, guys, I'm just gonna whip finish this fly. We got a little bit of gluing to do and some trimming of the legs, but this is essentially what our fly is gonna look like when it's done. Got our 2 sets of legs hanging out. I'm gonna come in here with my whip finish tool and just do a whip finish. Doesn't have to be a crazy knot, as we're gonna put a ton of super glue on all of these thread wraps. And I'm gonna come in here, whip finish, pull tight, trim out our thread. And now from here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna apply some super glue right away, as I got some other work to do on the legs, and I'm gonna let it dry. So I'm gonna flip it upside down. I'm gonna start with this. I wanna come in here and really just be fairly liberal without going too crazy, but I wanna dab on each of those segmented pieces where that thread is holding it to the hook shank itself. Now I'm gonna flip it back around so I can see it. Now, each of these double barred legs, I need to split them so they go into singles. So we'll start up here at the front. I like to use my scissors. You can also use a bodkin. I just come in here with the point and I separate them. And then I'm gonna pull them apart. I can get a hold of them. Always the hardest part with the little legs. Pull them apart like so. Do the same thing on the other side. And then we will need to trim to length. Like so you can see how they've just splayed apart a little bit. Now, for length, if I take them and bend them back, I want them to be just shy of the back of the foam. And both of these look pretty much perfect, and I think they're actually almost exactly the same length, so I'm gonna leave them. But you just don't want them to extend behind the back of the foam. Now on the back legs, I'm gonna come in here and I'm only separating below the knuckle, not on top. because that's representing that knee joint and the thicker leg that a hopper has at the back. So I'm going to separate these guys like so. And then I'm going to pick whichever one looks like it's sitting down at more of a better angle. And in this one, it's the front one. So I'm going to come back here and trim out the back portion of the leg. You could also dab some super glue on there for some extra security if you like. And then I'm going to come forward to the other one on this side, do the same thing. I'm going to choose whichever one is pointed down. So again, it happens to be the front one. Trim that out. Now we're just about there. I am just going to apply just a little bit of super glue just to the knuckles of those rubber legs. This takes a very, very small amount to be effective. Just a little touch. So those guys aren't going to come apart. I'm going to regather my deer hair one more time, make sure I don't need to trim any out. I've got a couple of stray pieces here that I am going to trim that don't want to stick with the crew. And there you have it, guys. That is your Mr. Peanut Hopper. If when you tied these rear legs in, if you had a super long segment on this bottom portion, just to how you tied your knot, what I want you to do is make sure that it's actually half the distance in length that it is from the body. So I look at the body's length. These ones I probably take just a little bit off of. I want it to be about half the length of the other one, other portion of the leg. And there you have it. That is the Mr. Peanut Hopper. Hopefully you had no struggle with that one and you got through it pretty easy. Love this pattern, super easy, high riding, lots of foam, not a lot of other junk on there to complicate it and make it sink. All right, guys, again, I am Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Boat Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. I want to thank you for joining us for this quick tie. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video, drop a comment, let us know how this fly went for you, if you liked it, if you didn't, or if you're indifferent about it. Either way, we'd like to hear about it. And don't forget to stay tuned for next week because we have a couple more flies headed your way.